Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The desert wind screams across the Colorado plains, carrying dust and secrets across miles of barren wasteland. Here, 90 miles south of Denver, sits a fortress that doesn't appear on most maps. ADX Florence. The most secure prison in America. A concrete tomb where the worst of the worst vanish from society forever. This isn't just a prison. It's the end of the line. The place where hope goes to die. Inside these walls, silence isn't just encouraged. It's enforced. It's weaponized. It's the punishment itself. FBI Special Agent Marcus Rivera had studied ADX Florence for years, but he never thought he'd be standing at its gates on a freezing February morning in 2019, his badge clutched in trembling hands. The call had come at 3 a.m, for words that made his blood run cold. "We have a situation." The situation was Thomas Silverton, inmate number 24,385-116. A man who shouldn't exist anymore. A ghost who'd been buried alive in concrete and steel for 17 years. Silverton was a former CIA operative turned traitor who'd sold classified intelligence to foreign governments in the late 90s. His betrayal had cost the lives of 12 American agents overseas. When they finally caught him in 2002, the judge had been clear. Life in ADX Florence. 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. No human contact. No redemption. No second chances. But at 2:47 that morning, Thomas Silverton had done the impossible. He'd made contact with the outside world. Rivera was escorted through 7 security checkpoints, each more intimidating than the last. Steel doors that weighed tons. Cameras watching every angle. Guards with dead eyes who'd seen things that would break ordinary men. The warden, a severe woman named Carol Brennan, met him in the administrative wing. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee neither of them would drink. "You need to understand something, Agent Rivera," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happened last night shouldn't be possible. Not here. Not ever." She handed him a tablet. On the screen was a message, typed in a secure internal system that only guards could access. The message had been sent from Terminal 7, located in the control room of H Unit, the most restrictive section of ADX Florence, where Thomas Silverton had spent the last 17 years. The message was simple. Chilling. They're listening. They've always been listening. The walls have ears. Check cell H7. Check the ventilation shaft above the light fixture. What I buried there will expose everything. But you need to hurry. They know I've reached out. They're coming for me tonight. If I'm dead by morning, you'll know I was telling the truth. The conspiracy doesn't end at these walls. It begins here. Rivera felt his stomach drop. When was the last time anyone checked on Silverton? "That's the problem," Brennan said, her voice cracking. "We checked on him at 2:30 a.m. during routine rounds. He was in his cell. Alive. Secure." 15 minutes later, this message was sent from a terminal that requires a 6-digit access code and biometric verification. "Agent Rivera, Thomas Silverton has never left his cell. Not once in 17 years. There's no physical way he could have accessed that computer." "Then who sent the message?" "That's what terrifies me," Brennan whispered. "Because according to our security logs, the person who accessed Terminal 7 and sent that message was Thomas Silverton himself. His fingerprints. His retinal scan. His access code. But he was locked in his cell the entire time." Rivera stood, his mind racing. "Take me to H Unit. Now." The walk to H Unit felt like descending into hell itself. Each corridor grew darker, quieter, more oppressive. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of despair. They passed cells where America's most dangerous criminals sat in silence. Terrorists. Serial killers. Crime bosses. Men who'd murdered without mercy and would do it again without hesitation. But none of them had managed what Silverton apparently had. None of them had beaten ADX Florence. When they reached H07, Rivera's blood turned to ice. The cell door was sealed. The observation slot was closed. Everything appeared normal. But through the small window, Rivera could see Thomas Silverton sitting on his concrete bed, staring directly at the door. Waiting. His lips moved silently, forming words only Rivera could read. "The ventilation shaft. Check it now. Before they erase everything." Brennan ordered the cell opened. 6 guards moved into position, weapons ready. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss that echoed through the corridor like a scream. Silverton didn't move. Didn't speak. He simply pointed up at the ceiling vent above the light fixture with one skeletal finger. Rivera climbed onto the bed, his hands shaking as he unscrewed the vent cover. Inside the shaft, wrapped in plastic and hidden for God knows how long, was a small black notebook. He pulled it out carefully, his heart hammering against his ribs. The first page contained a single sentence written in cramped, desperate handwriting. Everything you think you know about ADX Florence is a lie. This prison isn't keeping criminals in. It's keeping witnesses silent. Rivera flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with each entry. Names. Dates. Codes. References to classified operations that shouldn't exist. And one phrase, repeated over and over on every page. Project Coffin. They buried us alive to keep the secret safe. He turned to ask Silverton what it meant, but the words died in his throat. Thomas Silverton was smiling now. A terrible, knowing smile that held 17 years of madness and truth. You shouldn't have come here, Agent Rivera, he whispered, his voice like gravel scraping glass. Now they know you know. And ADX Florence doesn't let secrets leave. Behind Rivera, one of the guards reached for his radio. But before he could speak, the lights went out. Every single light in H unit. Emergency systems failed. Backup generators silent. In the darkness, Rivera heard something that made his blood freeze. Footsteps. Multiple footsteps. Coming from inside the walls themselves. And Thomas Silverton's laughter, echoing through the black like a death knell. The emergency lights flickered on after 47 seconds of absolute darkness, bathing H unit in hellish red illumination. Those 47 seconds felt like an eternity. In that time, Rivera had heard things he couldn't explain. Movement in the walls. Whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The sound of metal scraping against concrete, like something clawing its way through the foundation itself. When the lights returned, Thomas Silverton was still sitting on his bed, that terrible smile frozen on his face. But something had changed. The notebook in Rivera's hands felt heavier now, more dangerous. And when he looked down at it, he saw that new pages had appeared. Pages that hadn't been there moments before. Fresh ink. Warm to the touch. Impossible, Brennan whispered, her voice shaking. We need to evacuate this unit. Now. But before anyone could move, the intercom crackled to life. A voice filled the corridor. Not one of the guards. Not anyone from the control room. It was distorted, mechanical, but unmistakably real. Agent Rivera. You're holding evidence of 17 federal crimes, 12 assassinations, and one ongoing conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. What you do in the next hour will determine whether you leave ADX Florence alive. Choose wisely. The transmission cut off, leaving only static and the sound of Rivera's heart pounding in his ears. Who was that? He demanded, spinning to face Brennan. Who has access to your communication systems? Nobody, she said, backing away from Silverton's cell. Those systems are isolated. Closed circuit. There's no way to hack them from outside. Agent Rivera, I've run this facility for 9 years. What's happening right now violates every security protocol we have. This building was designed to be impenetrable. Whatever's happening, it's coming from inside. Rivera looked back at Silverton. Start talking. What is Project Coffin? For the first time in 17 years, Thomas Silverton stood. His movements were slow, calculated. The movements of a man who'd spent nearly 2 decades planning for this exact moment. He walked to the edge of his cell, stopping just before the threshold he hadn't crossed in all that time. Project Coffin was never about imprisoning criminals, Agent Rivera. It was about creating a black site that nobody could question. A place where inconvenient people could disappear forever with the full blessing of the justice system. I was CIA. I knew things. Things about operations in Eastern Europe, about money that went missing, about officials who weren't what they claimed to be. When I threatened to go public, they didn't just arrest me. They buried me alive. He gestured to the walls around him. But I'm not the only one. There are 11 other men in ADX Florence right now who aren't criminals. They're witnesses. Whistleblowers. People who knew too much and had to be silenced. We were given life sentences for crimes that were manufactured. Evidence that was fabricated. And we were sent here, to the one place where nobody would ever hear our screams. Rivera felt sick. That's insane. You're telling me this entire facility is a conspiracy? Not the entire facility, Silverton said softly. Just H unit. 7 cells. 11 men. All of us buried under layers of classified documents and national security orders. But here's what they didn't count on, Agent Rivera. When you lock dangerous men in cages and give them nothing but time, they become resourceful. Over the years, we've been communicating. Through pipes. Through ventilation systems. Through codes tapped on concrete walls. We've been building our case. Gathering evidence. And tonight, we're bringing it all to light. Brennan grabbed Rivera's arm. He's manipulating you. This is what these men do. They lie. They twist the truth until you can't tell reality from fantasy. We need to lock this unit down and get federal investigators here. Federal investigators? Silverton laughed, and the sound was hollow, broken. Agent Rivera, who do you think ordered our imprisonment? Who do you think has been maintaining this lie for 2 decades? The corruption doesn't stop at these walls. It goes all the way to Washington. Rivera opened the notebook again, his hands trembling. The new pages contained names. Officials he recognized. Senators. Military leaders. Intelligence directors. Each name was accompanied by dates, locations, and detailed descriptions of meetings that shouldn't exist in any official record. If even half of this was true, the implications were staggering. The ventilation systems, Rivera said suddenly, piecing it together. You've been using them to move information. To communicate with the outside world. Not just information, Silverton said quietly. Evidence. For years, we've been slowly, carefully, smuggling documentation out of ADX Florence. Hidden in maintenance equipment. Coded in repair requests. Buried in medical records. We built a network right under their noses. And 3 months ago, we made contact with someone on the outside. Someone who believed us. Who? A journalist named Sarah Chen. She was investigating corruption in the federal prison system. We fed her information slowly, carefully. Pieces of the puzzle. She was getting close to breaking the story. And then, 2 weeks ago, she disappeared. Her apartment was cleaned out. Her research was gone. Her sources vanished. They got to her, Agent Rivera. Just like they've gotten to everyone else who came close to the truth. Rivera's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen and felt his blood turn to ice. It was a message from an unknown number. No text. Just an image. A photograph of his daughter, Emma, sitting in her elementary school classroom. Taken today. Taken hours ago. The message was clear. His hands shook as he showed the phone to Silverton. You did this. No, Silverton said, and for the first time, Rivera saw genuine fear in his eyes. They did this. The people who put me here. The people who've been monitoring you since the moment you walked through those gates. Agent Rivera, you need to understand something. You can't win this fight through official channels. Everyone who could help you is either compromised or dead. Your only chance is to expose everything. All at once. Before they can stop you. Why should I trust you? Because in about 90 seconds, this entire unit is going to be flooded with gas. Not tear gas. Not something survivable. They're going to kill everyone in H unit and call it a tragic accident. A malfunction. And you're going to die right alongside us unless you run. Now. As if on cue, the ventilation systems hummed to life. But the air that came through didn't smell like recycled oxygen. It smelled chemical. Acrid. Wrong. Brennan's eyes went wide. That's not possible. I didn't authorize any system changes. Because you don't have control anymore, Silverton said, backing into his cell. They've taken over. Agent Rivera, there's a maintenance tunnel behind Panel 7 in the East Corridor. It leads to the outside. Take the notebook. Run. Expose everything. It's the only way to save your daughter now. They'll use her to keep you quiet unless you make the truth too big to contain. Rivera looked at Brennan, at the guards who were already coughing, at the red emergency lights that cast everything in blood-colored shadows. He looked at Thomas Silverton, a man who might be a traitor or might be the only honest person in this entire nightmare. The chemical smell grew stronger. His eyes began to water. He ran. Behind him, he heard the cell doors slamming shut, one by one. Sealing the men of H Unit inside their concrete tombs. He heard Silverton's voice one last time, echoing through the corridor. Project Coffin, Agent Rivera. Tell them about Project Coffin. Make them remember our names. Rivera found Panel 7, ripped it open with trembling hands, and crawled into darkness that smelled like earth and desperation. Behind him, the sounds of H Unit faded. The screams. The alarms. The dying gasps of men who'd been buried alive long before tonight. He emerged 30 minutes later in the Colorado wasteland, covered in dirt and blood, clutching a notebook that contained enough truth to bring down the government. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Agent Rivera, said a calm, measured voice. You've made a terrible mistake. Return the notebook to ADX Florence within 24 hours, and your daughter lives. Your wife lives. You get to walk away from this. Fight us, and everyone you love dies screaming. The choice is yours. The line went dead. Rivera looked back at the fortress rising from the desert like a monument to America's darkest secrets. Somewhere inside those walls, Thomas Silverton and 10 other men were dying. Or maybe they were already dead. Erased. Written out of history like they'd never existed at all. He opened the notebook to the last page. There, in Silverton's desperate handwriting, was a final message. If you're reading this, I'm dead. But the truth doesn't die with me. Check Safety Deposit Box 447 at Rocky Mountain Bank, Denver. Password, Coffin Protocol. Inside, you'll find everything. Every document. Every recording. Every piece of evidence we gathered over 17 years. But be warned, Agent Rivera. Once you open that box, there's no going back. You'll become what we are. A target. A ghost. A man the world will try to erase. Choose carefully. Choose wisely. Choose justice. Rivera stood in the desert as dawn broke over ADX Florence, painting the prison in shades of gold and crimson. He thought about his daughter. About his wife. About the life he could still have if he just walked away. Then he thought about the men dying in H Unit. About Sarah Chen, disappeared and possibly dead. About all the other people who'd been silenced to protect a lie. He pulled out his phone and made a call. This is Agent Marcus Rivera, FBI. I need an emergency team assembled. I have evidence of federal crimes involving ADX Florence Supermax. And I need protection for my family. Now. As he gave coordinates and waited for extraction, he didn't see the figure watching him from a ridge half a mile away. Didn't see the rifle scope tracking his movements. Didn't see the finger tightening on the trigger. But he heard the shot. And as he fell into the Colorado dust, the notebook slipping from his hands, Marcus Rivera's last thought was simple. They were never going to let him leave alive. Marcus Rivera woke up to the sound of machines beeping and the smell of antiseptic. His chest felt like it was on fire, each breath a knife twisting between his ribs. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Restraints. He was strapped to a hospital bed, thick leather cuffs binding his wrists and ankles. Not a hospital. The walls were too bare. Too cold. No windows. No natural light. Just fluorescent bulbs humming overhead like angry insects. You're awake. Good. We need to talk. Rivera turned his head, pain shooting through his neck. A man sat in the corner of the room, obscured by shadows. Mid-50s. Expensive suit. The kind of anonymous face that blended into government buildings and forgot itself the moment you looked away. Who are you? Rivera's voice came out as a croak. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you're alive. The shot was meant to kill you, Agent Rivera. Center mass. Should have torn through your heart. But apparently, someone changed the shooter's orders at the last second. Someone who thinks you might still be useful. Where's my family? Safe. For now. Your wife and daughter are in protective custody. Whether they stay safe depends entirely on what happens in this room. The man leaned forward, and Rivera finally saw his face. Cold eyes. The expression of someone who'd made too many terrible decisions and lost the capacity to feel guilt. You opened a door that should have stayed closed, Agent Rivera. Project Coffin was buried for a reason. Good reasons. National security reasons. National security? Rivera laughed, and it turned into a cough that brought blood to his lips. You murdered innocent men. You disappeared journalists. You threatened my family. We protected this country from truths it couldn't handle. Thomas Silverton wasn't a whistleblower, Agent Rivera. He was a traitor who sold information that got 12 people killed. The others in H Unit? Terrorists who knew the locations of cells we couldn't acknowledge. Foreign agents who'd been turned and weaponized. War criminals whose trials would have exposed operations that saved thousands of lives. We didn't bury innocent men. We buried necessary evils. Then why hide it? Why the elaborate cover-up? The man smiled, and it was the saddest thing Rivera had ever seen. Because the American people can't handle moral complexity anymore. They want heroes and villains. Good guys and bad guys. They can't accept that sometimes, to protect democracy, you have to become the monster. Project Coffin allowed us to neutralize threats that the justice system couldn't touch. Men who knew too much. Men who would have destroyed American intelligence operations if they'd ever testified in open court. We gave them life sentences for fabricated crimes, and we buried them where their secrets would die with them. That's not justice. No. It's survival. And it worked perfectly for 20 years until Thomas Silverton figured out how to beat our systems. Until he started reaching out. Until he infected you with his version of the truth. The man stood, walking closer to the bed. Here's what's going to happen, Agent Rivera. You're going to recover from your injuries. You're going to write a report stating that you investigated ADX Florence and found no evidence of wrongdoing. You're going to say that Thomas Silverton attempted to manipulate you with fabricated documents, and that the incident in H Unit was a tragic accident caused by a ventilation malfunction. You're going to close this case and never speak of it again. And if I refuse? Then your daughter never makes it to her 10th birthday. Your wife has a terrible accident. And you disappear into a cell just like Silverton's, where you'll spend the rest of your life screaming into silence. We've done it before. We'll do it again. Rivera closed his eyes. He thought about Emma's laugh. About his wife's smile. About the life they'd built together. Then he thought about Thomas Silverton's face in those final moments. The desperate hope that someone, anyone, would finally hear the truth. "You're going to let me go?" he asked quietly. "We're going to let you live. If you cooperate. I need to see the notebook. The one I was carrying when I was shot." The man hesitated, then pulled the black notebook from his jacket. "Why?" "Because I want to know if any of it was real. If Silverton was telling the truth or if he was just another con man playing games." The man handed him the notebook. 5 minutes. Then I need your answer. Rivera opened it with his free hand, flipping through the pages he'd read in the desert. The names. The dates. The operations. But then he reached a section he hadn't seen before. Pages that had been glued shut, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. He peeled them apart carefully. Inside was a different kind of evidence. Not accusations. Not conspiracy theories. Photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of men in H Unit before they were arrested. With their families. At their jobs. Living normal lives. And beneath each photograph, a handwritten note explaining who they really were. David Chen, Cell H4. Former NSA analyst who discovered illegal domestic surveillance programs. Threatened to go public. Arrested on fabricated espionage charges. Marcus Webb, Cell H6. Army captain who witnessed war crimes in Afghanistan and refused to stay silent. Court-martialed for treason based on manufactured evidence. Samuel Ortiz, Cell H9. DEA agent who uncovered CIA involvement in drug trafficking. Disappeared into ADX Florence on charges that were never made public. Page after page. 11 men. 11 stories. All of them silenced for threatening the machinery of American power. The last page contained a photograph that made Rivera's hands shake. It was Thomas Silverton. Not the broken, skeletal man he'd met in the cell. This was Silverton 20 years ago. Standing with his arm around a young woman. Both of them smiling. Happy. Human. Beneath the photo, Silverton had written one final message. Her name was Rachel. She was my wife. They told me she died in a car accident 3 months after my arrest. But I know the truth. They killed her to keep me quiet. To break me. To make sure I'd never fight back. I spent 17 years mourning her. And then, 6 months ago, I found out she's still alive. Living under a new identity. They faked her death to control me. Agent Rivera, if you're reading this, it means I'm dead. But Rachel is out there somewhere. Find her. Tell her I never stopped loving her. Tell her I never stopped fighting. And tell her that Project Coffin died with me. Tell her she's finally free. Rivera looked up at the man in the suit. What happened to Rachel Silverton? The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Maybe even guilt. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You killed her. Or you made everyone think you did. Where is she? This conversation is over, Agent Rivera. I need your decision. Do you cooperate, or do you become another ghost? Rivera thought about everything he'd learned. About the men who'd died in H Unit. About the journalist who'd disappeared. About all the people who'd been erased to maintain the lie. He thought about the badge he'd sworn to uphold and the justice he'd promised to serve. Then he thought about Emma. About holding her hand on the way to school. About her laugh when he pushed her on the swings. About the future she deserved. I'll cooperate, he said quietly. I'll write your report. I'll close the case. I'll forget everything I saw. The man nodded, satisfied. Smart choice. You'll be released tomorrow. Your family will be waiting. Life goes back to normal. But I have one condition. The man's eyes narrowed. You're not in a position to negotiate. I want to know Rachel Silverton is alive. I want proof. Just that. Nothing else. If you give me that, I'll bury Project Coffin forever. You have my word. The man studied him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and showed Rivera the screen. It was a photograph. Recent. A woman in her 60s, gray-haired and smiling, standing in front of a bakery. The sign above the door read Rachel's Kitchen and listed an address in Portland, Oregon. She's been there for 15 years, the man said quietly. New name. New life. She doesn't know Thomas is dead. She doesn't know he spent 17 years thinking she was gone. And she never will. Because you're going to keep your mouth shut. Rivera stared at the photograph, memorizing every detail. The woman's face. The address. The proof that at least one person had survived Project Coffin with something resembling freedom. I'll keep quiet, he said. But I'm sending her something. Anonymously. A letter from her husband. The one he wrote before he died. She deserves to know he never forgot her. That's not part of the deal. Then there is no deal. Rivera met the man's eyes. You can kill me. You can kill my family. But that letter gets sent either way. I've already arranged it. If I don't check in every 24 hours, it goes out automatically. So you can give Rachel Silverton closure, or you can start a war you won't win. Your choice. The man was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, straightening his suit. You're bluffing. Maybe. But do you really want to find out? 3 days later, Marcus Rivera walked out of the facility a free man. His wife and daughter were waiting outside, and when Emma ran to him, tears streaming down her face, he held her so tight he thought his healing ribs might crack. He'd written the report. Closed the case. Officially, Project Coffin never existed. ADX Florence was just a prison. The men in H Unit died in a tragic accident. Thomas Silverton was a manipulative traitor who'd tried to weaponize a federal agent with conspiracy theories. Officially, the truth was buried. But 2 weeks later, a woman in Portland opened her mailbox to find an unmarked envelope. Inside was a letter, 20 pages long, written in handwriting she recognized instantly even after 20 years. She read it standing in her kitchen, tears falling onto paper that had been hidden in a ventilation shaft in the most secure prison in America. The letter told her everything. About Project Coffin. About 17 years of silence. About a man who'd never stopped loving her even when they tried to break him. It ended with 3 words that had been true from the moment they met until the moment he died. You are free. Rachel Silverton read the letter 7 times. Then she picked up the phone and called a number she'd kept hidden for 15 years. The number of a journalist who'd once promised to help her if she ever needed it. This is Rachel Silverton, she said quietly. I have a story to tell you. About 11 men who were buried alive by their own government. And I have proof. 6 months later, the story broke. Not in mainstream media. They wouldn't touch it. But in independent outlets and encrypted networks that couldn't be silenced. The evidence was overwhelming. The photographs. The documents. The testimony of a woman who'd been erased. Slowly, carefully, the truth spread like wildfire through cracks in the system. Marcus Rivera watched it all from his home in Virginia, holding his daughter's hand as the news scrolled across his computer screen. He knew what was coming. He knew they'd come for him eventually. But for now, Emma was safe. His wife was safe. And somewhere in America, people were finally asking the right questions. His phone rang. Unknown number. You lied to me, Agent Rivera, said the voice from the shadows. No, Rivera said quietly. I kept my word. I closed the case. I wrote the report. I never spoke about what I saw. But I never promised to stop Rachel Silverton from speaking. That was her choice. Her truth to tell. You've destroyed everything we built. No. I exposed what you buried. There's a difference. And now the world knows. Project Coffin is over. The line went dead. Marcus Rivera sat in the darkness of his home, his daughter sleeping upstairs, his wife beside him. He thought about Thomas Silverton and the 10 other men who died to protect a truth that could finally breathe. He thought about the price of justice and the cost of silence. Tomorrow, there would be consequences. Investigations. Trials. Maybe even a reckoning. But tonight, for the first time in months, Marcus Rivera slept without nightmares. Because somewhere in the Colorado desert, beneath layers of concrete and steel, the coffins had finally been opened. And the dead were speaking at last.